You're listening to the Bear in Mind podcast, episode number 31.
A podcast uncovering identity, color, and love, where driving yourself crazy is totally sane and curable. Now your host, T. Vias.
Do you ever wonder what's really going on in an argument? I mean, what's really going on? Because we kind of know that the argument isn't about who does the dishes or who's supposed to unload the dishwasher or the shoes in the middle of the hallway or even where to go on holiday. And we kind of get that it's deeper than the surface level things that we're arguing about. And I noticed in my arguments that I never, felt like anything was resolved even after the argument. And I never felt good or understanding of what I was arguing for, what the other person was arguing for as well. And I started looking into some of the patterns in anger in myself and the patterns in the disagreements and arguments I would have with my family and friends. And what I noticed is that there were 3 reasons why I was arguing. And knowing these 3 reasons actually helped me become sharper in disagreements and arguments. And it helped me, and by sharper, I mean it helped me understand why I wasn't feeling great about the argument. It also helped me understand the other person in the argument. So the 3 reasons of why we argue are actually based on a cognitive psychology framework, and that is our thoughts create our emotions. And I speak a little bit about this in the previous episode, number 30, Love Actors, where actors actually proved this concept of how our thoughts create our emotions. And this construct is actually explained in a podcast episode by the Life Coach School, where the owner of the Life Coach School has broken down this cognitive psychology construct into what she calls the model that helps you see kind of how your mind is working. And so I'll use her construct, and I'll have links to that episode in the show notes if you want more details about it. Basically, what I'm going to use is that there's the facts or circumstances of a situation, and then there's the thoughts about what is actually happening, and then the emotion it creates. And then from there, those emotions can lead to action. So action can be, what you say to the other person in an argument, or even inaction, going silent or doing nothing. And this will become clearer as I go through the 3 patterns of why we argue. So the first reason why we argue is we are disagreeing about the facts of the situation, the circumstances of the situation. So I have an example. I was visiting my family, and we were at a lunch together, and we were at my parents' home, and there were other relatives there. And my mom says to me, "You never send me emails, you don't stay in touch." And I don't live near my parents, so I was visiting, and she says this to me in front of a bunch of people. And I said to her, "I have sent you emails, and I've received no response." And she's like, "You've never sent me an email." And I said, "Okay, I have my laptop here," because I had my stuff with me. "I have my laptop here, and I can show you that I've sent emails." And my relatives jumped in and said, "Oh, T, you don't need to do that." Okay, and they were trying to kind of calm down the disagreement. And the disagreement between my mother and me was actually about the fact whether or not I was emailing her and staying in touch with her. And so disagreements can stay at that level, and it kind of feels like, okay, I can prove that I've sent you emails on my end. Whether or not she received them, I don't know. And a lot of times we try to keep arguments at a level of the circumstance, like just argue about the circumstances, when in fact you can actually prove it. Now, it seems quite petty, and I felt quite petty. Well, I'm going to get out my laptop. But sometimes people want to keep that argument at that circumstance level because it prevents you from going into a deeper level of the disagreement. And I think it prevents you from getting a deeper understanding of each other and improving your relationship when you are still at a level of the factual line and you can't come to some sort of agreement on what has been done and what has actually happened. The second pattern is that each person in the argument thinks that their thoughts or perceptions about a circumstance are right. So then there's the facts about the situation, and then there's our thoughts and our perceptions about what is actually happening, and then we really believe that that's the correct viewpoint of what has happened. And I have an example of this. A buddy of mine, and I'll call him Bud, and we went out. It was a group of friends of us, and we were celebrating the holidays, and it was wintertime, and it was quite cold, and we had been in the restaurant for 3 to 4 hours. And so we leave the restaurant, and we're walking, and it's quite chilly at this time of night. And I kind of say to myself, but out loud, I say, "Oh, it's so cold, it's freezing." And Bud turns to me and says, "It's not cold, it's summertime." And I kind of chuckled, and I was like, okay, I was really freezing. And then we continue walking, and we're approaching kind of the main street, the High Street area, and there's a railway crossing that we have to cross. And at this moment, a train is coming, and it goes through, in my perception, really fast at high speed for the time of night, and it's going through a residential part of town. And so I say, "Oh, that freight train seems to be really going at high speed." And he says to me, "It's not going at high speed. It's going how it normally goes." And it's conversations like these when you have a perception of a situation, whether that's temperature or the speed of a freight train, the only fact is actually the temperature. So the temperature, it could be, freezing, and that's the actual fact. And our perception of what the freezing point means is our thought, and there's no absolute truth in that. For somebody who comes from a warmer climate, they're going to feel really cold at the freezing temperature. And somebody who comes from a colder climate, they're going to think freezing point is a great temperature. And although my friend and I weren't in what you would probably call a true argument, was we were actually disagreeing about the situation. And for me, what I noticed is that I wasn't feeling good with a lot of my interactions with my friend, because a lot of times when I shared a thought as simple as about the weather, he'd sometimes came back with, "Well, no, it's actually like this. No, it's actually like this. This is what's happening," as if his thoughts were the actual truth to the situation. And so it helped me actually understand my friend better, and it helped me become sharper in how I communicated with him in our next conversations. The third and last pattern is we're judging the other person. And it may seem obvious that that's what is part of why we argue. And to me, it wasn't actually really clear. I guess I kind of knew, okay, judging someone doesn't help the argument. When I looked at judgments from the terms of our thoughts create our emotions and our emotions create our actions, I could see how judgments work. So an example of this is that I've asked my roommate several times not to put his shoes in the middle of the hallway in the entryway to help create more of a clear path in this narrow walkway. And it doesn't happen. And I am irritated with the fact that it still keeps happening. And so I begin to judge his action of leaving the shoes in the middle of the hallway as if it comes from the emotion of him disrespecting me. So I'm judging the person's action knowing what emotion and thought determined their action. So he's doing it because he disrespects what I think and feel and doesn't want to honor that. And that kind of judgment, when you go to talk to another person and tell them, hey, I still want you not to put the shoes in the middle of the hallway. When you go in with that kind of judgment, that's often what makes an argument and disagreement heated, is that we know the intention of the person that led to a particular action. And it very well, as it comes to find out, that my roommate isn't actually disrespecting me. It's actually that he doesn't think it's a big deal that the shoes are in the middle of the hallway, that there's enough space to still walk down the hallway. And he has a different perception of what picking up means than I do. And thinking that his action is based on his perception of the situation as, I don't care what T thinks or feels, is actually inaccurate. It's as if I know what's going inside his mind. And that's often what leads to more of the heated arguments, the heated disagreements with somebody, is that we think that we see an action as simple as even somebody ignoring a text. Ignoring a text is actually your thought about the situation. The actual fact is that there's no response of a text. But we assume that someone's ignoring us. And so if we go into the next conversation with that person, we take that judgment as if, okay, the lack of a text response is out of somebody ignoring me. And that's kind of what sparks us into those heated discussions. So if you think about the last disagreement or argument you had with someone, it could even be a disagreement that you've had with somebody on social media. If you look back at it, you can actually see what the person is saying, and especially on social media, you have a circumstance of what they've actually written down. And is the disagreement at a factual level? You're still disagreeing about the circumstances of the situation? Or is it more about that you or the other person thinks that there's an absolute truth or one viewpoint of a situation? Or is it more that you've judged the other person as if you know that what they've said comes from a certain intention, that they think a certain way, and therefore they behave this way? And you can definitely see patterns with somebody that you have a lot of disagreements with family members and friends. And you can go into the next conversation with some of this knowledge and adjust some of your communication so you can understand actually where that person is coming from and have maybe less of an argument and more of a discussion where you get to know each other better. So I'm going to wrap it up here, and I'll check back with you next week.
Thanks for listening. Listen for a new episode next Tuesday by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. Bye for now.